One of the things I'm paid to do is point out that not everybody here is a business person, so we welcome all the representatives of the city of Missoula and Missoula County and all their departments. Before I explain how we're going to proceed with the program today, this is the 11th annual State of Missoula program. I want to take just a couple moments to recognize some of our elected officials. County Commissioner Barbara Evans. Barbara, thank you. County Sheriff Doug Chase. And we have a large number of members of the city council. Perhaps if I read all their names, and if you would all stand up when I'm through and we can recognize them. And the following council members: Larry Anderson, Christian Gorelli, Doug Harrison, Lois Herbig, Jim McGrath, Andy Sponseller, Craig Sweet, who is the president of the city council, and Linda Tracy. Thank you for coming. And a couple newcomers, or relative newcomers to the business community. I want to introduce the new manager of the Village Red Lion, Dan Carlino. Welcome. And I didn't see him, but I hope he's here. The new manager of the Bon Marché, Rod Malone. Rod, are you here? Must be busy putting together another sale. Anyway, welcome Rod and Dan to the community in your positions. Generally, the format is going to be as follows, and for those of you who've come the last 2 years, the one change that's going to take place is that we're not going to have a panel of reporters asking questions. We changed that this year, believing that members, chamber members and others in the audience have some specific questions they like to address to either or both of our elected leaders. So after 2 presentations, each one taking about 15 or 20 minutes, both our guests will come up here at the same time, which is why we have 2 podia here. And I studied Latin once. Jim, right? Jim Bell's also a Latin teacher. They'll come up, and I will have a remote microphone. I'll take it around if anyone wants to ask a question. You'll have that opportunity. The only thing I ask is that in the interest of moving the program along and trying to cover as many topics as we can, if you can address one question to one of our guests. So going first, I'll introduce both our speakers now. Our first presenter, or first speaker, is going to be the mayor of, that's how we agreed, isn't it, Dan? Yeah. No, not that he's the mayor, that he's first. Our first speaker is the mayor of Missoula, Dan Kemmis. Dan is a former speaker of the Montana House of Representatives and was a Montana legislator for 8 years. He's the author of The Good City and the Good Life, published by Houghton Mifflin in 1995, and of Community and the Politics of Place, the University of Oklahoma Press in 1990. A former chair of the National League of Cities Leadership Training Council, Mayor Kemmis is a member of the board of directors of the National Civic League, the Kettering Foundation, and the Pew Partnership for Civic Change. He's a fellow of the Dallas Institute, and go Cowboys. And sorry, and served on the advisory board for the PBS series The American Promise. Mayor Kemmis has had articles published in national publications on such topics as city design, community building, and regional economies. He was recognized by the Utne Reader in 1995 as one of its 100 visionaries. Mayor Kemmis is a graduate of Harvard University and the University of Montana Law School. Following him will be Chair of the County Commission, Michael Kennedy. Michael was born and raised in Billings, graduated from Gonzaga University with a degree in civil engineering, and minor degrees in philosophy and theology. Michael practiced as a consulting civil engineer and environmental scientist for more than 30 years, specializing in infrastructure development, water quality, air quality, and hazardous waste remediation. Michael is married to Sherry Montana. Each has 2 adult children. Past activities include president of various non-for-profit foundation, of a nonprofit foundation specializing in low-income housing, was president of the school board, president of a board governing a ballet dance company, and Michael served as volunteer for numerous public organizations. So I welcome both our guests, and now I would like to ask Mayor Kimmis to step up and make his presentation.
Thank you, Michael. President Sokolowski, Commissioner Kennedy, Commissioner Evans, President Sweet, and members of the City Council and fellow citizens of Missoula. It is a pleasure once again to be here, a pleasure especially to share the podium with Michael Kennedy, which I understand by all accounts is easier than sharing a couch with President Commissioner Kennedy. Could only be glad that the reporter chose not to report on my body language at that particular meeting, knowing what one subjects oneself to under those circumstances. I've had occasion recently to be reported on in a couple of different media in ways that have sometimes been puzzling. And in one national broadcast recently, the reporter referred to my youthful face and led my wife to wonder which mayor it was that he had been talking with. She allowed us how she could remember when I had a youthful face. And then another reporter began his column by referring to me as the personable mayor of Missoula, and this also led to some speculation about the veracity of reporters or their powers of observation. Having thoroughly maligned Jean, and in spite of the fact that, as far as I know, she's not due to testify before any grand juries this week, I'd like to introduce her because there are some of you who have not had a chance to meet her, and I'd like you to do that. Introduce Jean. This is actually my 7th consecutive State of Missoula address, and that apparently makes me now the second longest serving mayor in Missoula's history. The only one who has served a longer continuous tenure was Dwight Mason back in the 1930s, I believe, and perhaps into the 1940s. It may lead to some speculation that Missoula is not an especially easy place to be mayor of. I think that we've had a total of 46 mayors over our 114 or so years of being a city. If it is the case that it's not an especially easy place to be mayor of, I think that that's only a different kind of tribute to Missoula. In general, I think that Missoula is a very challenging place to be the mayor of, and that's as it should be. Sometimes I think that what being mayor amounts to is pretty much a matter of trying to keep track of the shifting clusters of discontent that swirl around you. There are always going to be some people that are unhappy with you, and usually, if you're an activist mayor at all, a substantial number of those people. It reminds me sometimes of the story of Winston Churchill. Churchill, at least early in his career, had a habit of changing parties. He had other ways of making enemies, but that was one of his favorite ways of making enemies. And at one point, having just shifted parties and having everybody on both sides of the aisle upset with him, happened to be at a time when George Bernard Shaw was just ready to produce one of his plays. Shaw sent Churchill a telegram saying, opening night Friday, would love you to come and bring a friend if you have one. Churchill wired back immediately, impossible to be there for the opening performance, will come for the second performance if there is one. So keeping track of the various forms of discontent that attach to the mayor's office can be done in a number of different ways. One of them is to keep track of the nicknames that are attached to the mayor's office. This can be a confusing kind of enterprise, though, because the nicknames always seem to apply to very different kinds of people. It's been difficult for me, for example, to know how at one and the same time somebody could be the dreamily ineffective Mayor Moonbeam and at the same time be known in some quarters as the ruthlessly aggressive Saddam chemist, as our annexation policies have sometimes led people to. Or another way to look at it is the question of how you can manage to keep both the rough club and the new party equally convinced that you are the willing tool of the other side's evil designs. And that I've sometimes managed to do. Or how to keep both Barbara Evans and Andy Sponseller, both the Chamber of Commerce and the Neighborhood Network, at the same growth management table. And that gets us a little bit closer to the challenge that I think we face right now in Missoula, and to Barbara's credit and to Andy's, to the Chamber's credit and the Neighborhood Network's credit. We are all at the same table. We are all working, I think, as well on behalf of Missoula as any set of elected officials and citizens have perhaps worked for several decades. And that, I think, is because, not taking credit for this myself at all, but aside from me, that you are exceptionally well served in the people that you have elected to office, and that we are exceptionally well served both by the people who work for the city and the county and by the citizens who devote themselves so tirelessly to the work that we face in this community. Those that I work most closely with in the arena of growth management are the commissioners, and I know how committed they are to it, and the City Council. And I would like to recognize once again the City Council's good support of this process and their deep involvement in it, their understanding of its importance. I would also like to recognize that set of citizens who engaged in the scenarios process as stakeholders, and there must be several of them here, and I would like to ask the stakeholders who are present to stand and be recognized by your fellow citizens for the work that you have done. Could I ask the stakeholders who are present to rise, please? Hand in hand with the work that we have done on growth management has been a substantial step forward in our overall long-term planning capacity. And that is the step that we have taken in the last few months to integrate the county's planning efforts and the city's planning efforts into one office. And that is something that I am very proud of, and it is going to serve both of our governments and this entire community very well. What we need to do is to bring to this ongoing challenge of growth and change in our community the intelligence and the care which have won for Missoula the reputation of being one of the most livable cities on this continent. I have an opportunity in March to accept on behalf of this city an award as a City of Vision, an award that will be given to 3 or 4 cities around the world this spring by the International Making Cities Livable organization. That award is no small accomplishment for this community, and it is one that clearly the entire community has had a hand in winning for us. Wherever I go now, first of all, I used to introduce myself always as being from Missoula, Montana. I have recently taken, as a matter of an experiment, simply as introducing myself being from Missoula. And what's astonishing is how often that's now recognized. But what is even more rewarding is the clear sense of respect and admiration that the name of Missoula raises in almost every quarter. This community is genuinely known as one of the leading examples of a community that has worked hard to make itself the best place that it can possibly be for the people who live here. And I congratulate all of you on that. This has been a matter of hard work. It has been a matter of outstanding citizenship. And you are all aware of the examples of that citizenship. This summer we will welcome once again visitors from around the world to the International Choral Festival. We will be able to introduce them to some new features of Missoula, including a new pavilion in Caras Park and the new carousel there. Those are just a few of the examples of the outstanding work of citizenship. In many of those cases, what we have accomplished because of a partnership between the very engaged and resourceful and creative citizenry of this town and the tremendously dedicated and able people who serve you in your city and county governments. And I would just like to ask all of the employees of city and county government, if I may, to stand now and be recognized by your fellow citizens. In working with these people, I am tremendously privileged to have the assistance of someone who knows both of our governments very well. I'd like to make a special introduction of my Chief Administrative Officer, Janet Stevens. Janet? Let me just review for you very briefly some of the good work that these people who work for you and you have done together over the last few years. And part of the frustration of being here is how abbreviated we have to make this list. And yet just hearing this list should remind each one of you of the tremendous good work that we have done together. We have just passed an open space bond of substantial dimensions, which will allow us to preserve some of the unique features of this community against the pressures of growth that we're experiencing. A wonderful example of cooperation between the city and county and the citizenry of Missoula. We have established, again, in a joint venture, this time with the University of Montana as well, and with the Forest Service, with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and other agencies, a trails collaborative that is establishing more and more good trails throughout this community, across the riverfront and out into the wilderness area. In developing the pedestrian friendliness of Missoula, we're now on the verge of finally reconnecting the north side to the rest of Missoula in a more humane way. We're about to rebuild the California Street Bridge and open a connection between the downtown of Missoula and the area that Champion used to occupy over there. That area is ripe for redevelopment, and we'll be very well positioned to redevelop it. We've now provided sewer to that area. We've got trails planned or in progress across the area and on both sides of it. We've worked very hard together on affordable housing. We've just finished the renovation of the Palace Hotel. Again, a public and private partnership to bring some affordable housing into downtown Missoula in a way that the entire community can be very proud of. Our transportation planning goes forward with a great deal of collaboration between the city and the county and the state. We have won the necessary approval for the widening of the Orange Street Bridge. We did, with good citizen participation, we have taken the time to figure out what really needs to be done at Brooks South Russell, and we will get it done. We're working together to improve our mass transit system in the city and throughout the community. We have done more laying of sewer lines in this community in the last 6 years than we had done in the previous 30, and we have plans for a substantial increase in that, and we will continue to take the steps necessary to protect Missoula's aquifer. The Health Board and the Health Department have committed themselves after a careful analysis of Missoula's health status, have committed themselves to a process of making Missoula the healthiest place to live that it can possibly be. We've built new fire stations. We've reached agreements with Rural Fire for the joint provision of service. And one small step that I'm very proud of is that we have finally begun to hire women as firefighters. There are a number of challenges that we face as a community, and that's going to take all of our resourcefulness to face together. Not least of them is the challenge of increase in violence, and especially youth violence. This is something that our governments have to be committed to addressing themselves to, but it's something that we can only address finally as an entire community working together. This is one of those challenges to our governmental and civic capacity. We have this year an opportunity to ask ourselves how well prepared we are to meet the challenges of the next decades in Missoula. Our local government review, which is now underway, is an unusual opportunity for the entire community in a democratic way to look at our form of government and determine whether it delivers service in the best way that it possibly can. I have encouraged us to look at the form of the city council. I'm actually less concerned about the size than the form. I think it's important that we ask whether having some at-large representation on the council would be good for the community or not. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a question that we should be asking ourselves, and I encourage the Local Government Study Commission to give us the opportunity to debate that. What I do know is that regardless of the size or the form of the council, that we're very well served by the council that we have. that we have tremendously dedicated people there. And I know this also, that in terms of our civic health, that we have to be careful about the sorts of things that we subject public officials to. We're very lucky to have the city council members that we have and the county commissioners that we have. But I know how hard it is to persuade people to run for office. I know that most of you sitting in this room would not consider running for office for a variety of reasons. But one of them, I believe, is that as hatefulness has grown throughout our society, as the tendency has grown to treat public officials with disdain, that it has become more and more difficult to persuade good people to run for office. And we in this city need to be careful about that. I joked earlier about some of the nicknames that are applied to me, and while I think that joking about them is by far the best way to approach it, I need to say also that when that kind of thing is done in a hateful way, that it hurts. And while I'm thick-skinned or thick-skulled or stubborn enough not to let the hurting trouble me very much, I know that it does trouble some other people, and that it makes it harder for us to get good people to seek office. I was proud of my son for having said at a forum recently that we can't hope to address issues of violence by bringing to it a violent attitude. I think he's right about that, but I think that it goes hand in hand with a stronger warning and reminder that we need to bring to ourselves. And no one has stated it better than somebody that I've quoted to you before, some of you, but good people are worth quoting more than once. And so I'm going to quote this in closing from the President of the Czech Republic, Václav Havel. He says, in other words, if there is to be any chance at all of success in building a civil society, there is only one way to strive for decency, reason, responsibility, sincerity, civility, and tolerance. And that is decently, reasonably, responsibly, sincerely, civilly, and tolerantly. If there is one thing that makes me proud to be the mayor of Missoula, it is how well this community exemplifies those traits. And I only ask that we understand how important it is to preserve that basic commitment to what it means to be a democratic people.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for attending this afternoon's session. I certainly appreciate your attendance and attention. And I'm thankful also to the Chamber of Commerce for providing this forum to us. It's one that is of great value to our community. When Michael Jaworski asked me a few weeks ago to speak today, he mentioned on how he felt that there were some problems with the presentation last year, and it left very little time for questioning. And I said I thought I could deal with that okay in the length of my talk and my comments. And then he said, well, I'd like to give you a few indications on how I'd like the program to go. He said, our program is limited to an hour and a half, and he said, in that time we're expected to eat lunch, and he says, and then we're expected to listen to 2 speeches and have time for some active commentary from the public. And I thought, well, I know that that Dan is rather long-winded, and that gave me time for pause, and yet I said, I think I can handle that. And then a funny thing happened. I began to look at really my notes and prepare for this this talk when in the mail came actually the invitation. And the invitation was interesting because what it said was, and I'll read from this, this program will provide you with an excellent opportunity to hear from the chief elected leaders talk about the pressing issues of Missoula today, including growth management, open space, local government review, traffic and other planning, annexation, and much more. After the presentation by Mayor Kemmis and Commissioner Kennedy, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Don't miss this program. Well, I look at my watch, it's 5 minutes after 1, I haven't even begun my speech, and I'm wondering, how am I going to accomplish all of this? So what I, in fact, did was reduce the overall format. I'm sorry, Michael. And I'm really going to talk about 3 primary issues. And those are growth management, the space needs of government in order to conduct business that we all want, and the jail, that word, that 4-letter word. And I want to caution you that my comments are brief, and they're certainly not comprehensive, and they're meant to provoke discussion and hopefully even some questioning at the end of this time. First with growth management. Growth management, of course, was begun, say late 1993, but really had its beginnings in early 1994. And over the past 2 years, the effort has been to gather the city and the county elected officials, along with some representatives of the community in general, and the business community together to see whether there was some common ground for discussion. And I think, in fairness over those 2 years, that there are 2 outcomes that, on which we can all agree. And the first one, of course, is that the city and county, in fact, are talking. We do have cooperative ventures, and I would say that this time is better than any time that I have noticed in Missoula, where the city and county governments are actually cooperating on a high level for achievement of good service to the community. Part of the outcomes of that have been interesting, and one outcome came rather quickly after about 9 months worth of deliberations, and it's entitled a themes document. And some of you may have heard that, and others of you have not. And what I'd like to do is just read from the preamble of that document, because it's a very important document, and it kind of sets the stage for not only the 2 years worth of work on growth management, but the forever work on growth management as it becomes institutionalized in our process. It says, throughout the process of growth and change, we must preserve the valued characteristics of our communities. It is our mission to achieve 2 equally important goals: to protect our critical lands and natural resources, i.e. riparian resources, wildlife habitat, hillsides, air and water quality, and open spaces, and 2, to enhance human resources. That's health, safety, social, educational, recreational, and cultural services, employment, and housing. Now those are all good sounding words. We like to hear them. The question before us and the challenge before us is how really do we affect all of that? How do we do this? And that becomes a task that most of us admit is not only difficult, it is exceedingly frustrating, and it's time consuming, and yet we find that sitting around that table amongst the animated conversations that we do have, that in fact it is worth it. And we have a firm belief in that, we are committed to it, and we will succeed in it. Dan spoke well of our community, and we have every reason to continue to speak well of our community. And on occasion, we have to take that time to compare ourselves to other communities of certain size within the United States. And we do that really to gas up and to fill up the energy that we need in order to succeed in our endeavor. At the same time, I think it's a bit dangerous to compare ourselves to other communities, because we really don't want to do that. What we want to do is compare ourselves to ourselves. We always want to strive for more. We are, we think, the best, and we think we even want to become better, and we think we know how to do that. During the growth management process, of course, some citizens were asked to come and speak about the vision of Missoula. And Michael Jaworski and I and another person sat on a committee to talk about how we were going to attract people that represented roughly the 400 interests in the community, so that we could gather those, ask that question, and get really productive result from them. And over a period of time, some 400 people were considered with a variety of interests, and nearly 54 of those people sat as stakeholders in the overall scenarios process. And one of the results, and there were many results of that process, but one of the results of that process was a very simple survey of what community interests and needs and concerns are. And it was interesting that the growth management process in its 2 years listed some concerns and the opinion of those task force members on what those concerns were. And then the scenarios stakeholders met over several days and several very, very long meetings and did the same. And then they sent out a survey. 10,000 people were asked the question, what were the concerns in the community? And interestingly, it didn't seem to matter what the time was, the time taken, or the forum, or who was asked. 3 or 4 of the concerns rose to the top. And those are, in this community, traffic congestion, increased crime and social concerns, the loss of open space, and environmental health. The point is it validated work not only of the Growth Management Task Force, but also of the scenarios process, and that's a very important point to make. You know, we know intuitively some of the things that give us a great deal of concern, and it seems not to matter how long we study it or who we ask, those still rise to the top of concerns within our community, and we intend to address them. Another aspect of the scenarios process was a recommendation on policy making to both governments, the city and the county government. And the question asked of the scenarios stakeholders was, please do this in some way that we can act on it to achieve the goals that were established in our mission. And what the process members did was submit a group of 44 tools, management tools, to the city and the county governments for consideration. And there are any number of commentary about those tools, and I'll just mention highlights of some of those tools and what they were in the general categories. They included education, comprehensive planning, implementation and regulation, and some of the specific tools were resource inventories. Certainly that seems valuable. Others were agreements between city and county governments to achieve certain goals. Those also included performance zoning, which relies rather on cookbook methodologies to separate incompatible uses to rather talk about the performance of the specific zoning request to make sure that it's compatible with overall goals of growth management. And impact fees, which there will be some discussion on in this coming year, and certainly a lot of debate and concern over. Of those, of course, there are about 20 of the 44 that already are given serious consideration, and we're hoping that both governments will be able to work on those and deal with the stemming problems of growth using those tools. The second issue that I want to talk about is the space needs for the community. In 1974, the county government constructed the public health building, and it's been the last time that a capital project of that size was built in Missoula County. That's a good long time. And since then, in 1975, when the population of the overall county was somewhat less than 60,000, to today, when it approaches 90,000, the same facilities really have served county government. And that overflow is something that no longer really can be tolerated. And so what has happened is that the city and the county and MRA joined to do a non-jurisdictional analysis of the space needs to provide services to the overall community of Greater Missoula. And the results of that study are now available to us. They were presented last week. And the unique feature of that shows the agreement that the city and county governments are now having, and that is that it's a non-jurisdictional analysis. What comes first is really service to the community. And what comes next, of course, is the jurisdictional obstacle that may occur. Does it make sense, for example, to have two separate departments that are separated by space? For example, the police department and the sheriff's department. Would it make sense to have a common space for those and dispatch those out of a common area? Would it make sense, for example, to have a common road department, not separated by space? Maybe we can provide better service to our community in that manner. In any case, I think it's a remarkable report and something that we're looking at really quite closely. And we can, by virtue of the fact that it is a joint report, it shows the level of cooperation that exists again between this city and county of ours in Missoula. Last issue, of course, has to do with the jail, and I want to address it last because at the moment it is a most serious issue in Missoula County, and one that requires the attention of all of us, not just elected officials, but all of us within the community, because it has implication for us both tax-wise and philosophy-wise, which we need to discuss. In 1979 or so, or in at least the late 70s, there was a beginning of a series of lawsuits against the county with respect to the size of the jail and the treatment of prisoners. All of those lawsuits, of course, were dispensed with in favor of the county. At the same time, the size remains the same. The population has increased, and there are some serious deficiencies within that structure and within the overall program that really need to be addressed. And past the lawsuits and the ballot issues and the studies and the philosophical discussions of the jail, still looms large. What do we do with that problem when we are, in fact, facing enormous debt and enormous costs with respect to that? The overall jail facilities, of course, new facilities would cost several millions of dollars. And that is going to affect us now and in the future, and the overall cost of operation and maintenance of those facilities will cost us even more. And we have to honestly look at what service the jail serves within our community as a component of our society. We in this country have elected to use a jail as a component of our criminal justice system, rightly or wrongly, and it is there, and we need it, and we need somehow to address what those pressing needs are. I think it is important to understand always that the issue of the jail is driven by really two issues. One, public safety, which is paramount, and two, and probably not in second place, is the security of the staff. And most people think in terms of a Holiday Inn for criminals, and really it's not. It's an issue of public safety and an issue of security for staff. And I think we need to go away with that in mind, knowing that we have to come to terms with that particular issue and deal with it in the coming years. In closing, what I'd like to do, by means of provoking some commentary, is to list some words that involve our community and are in discussion and around which numerous issues are on a day-to-day being discussed. And the first one, of course, is air quality. And I'd like to say that the health department has recently signed an agreement to research the relationship between school absenteeism and air quality in the Missoula Valley. That's just one of the happenings in the air quality arena. In water quality, the Water Quality District just published a long-awaited unsewered areas study that prioritizes different areas of concern within the community. And again, that's just a single activity of that particular agency. Strategic planning, for the first time, Missoula County is engaged in strategic planning, which has as its goal delivery of services more economically to citizens of Missoula County in the future. Taxes, it's hard on a local level to affect taxes, except that as a member of the of the Montana Association of Counties, we do have some influence on the legislative agenda before that body. And Fern Hart and I worked hard to get the the state meeting, or the annual meeting, located in Missoula County, and that will happen this September. And that's a preface to the legislature beginning next year, and we're hoping that the overall tax issue and tax reform is going to be high, not only on the legislative agenda for MACO, but also for our next legislative effort. Economic development, the county is in the economic development picture, and of course we know about the airport park, and our interest as a county is to provide long-term jobs and long-term businesses as a component of our society, which is very necessary. We feel secure in that position, and we feel a lot of encouragement and a lot of progress made there. Recreation. The County Parks Department has completed an inventory of the overall county land resources and is engaged in a plan to determine what we're to do with those resources. In addition to that, we have from our management team a recommendation on other non-park county lands that also has some pretty serious implication and consequence with respect to recreation. Traffic, the county was instrumental in a recent formation of a task force to examine methods to enhance the bus service in the community, and that's needed. We need to look no further than an interim report that was presented by the transportation consultant last October that suggested if we continue to develop and drive our cars as we are today, that by the year 2015 we'll need about $130 million in improvements to our roadway system. So we need ways to find ways to wean ourselves away from the automobile to a certain extent. So we've developed transportation demand management in cooperation with Ravalli County that'll do just exactly that. That's a hopeful agenda, and yet we have a high degree of enthusiasm and expectation that will reach some result. Land use and comprehensive planning efforts. We're doing comprehensive planning efforts in the Miller Creek area and also Lolo and several other areas. Those seem to be high pressure areas with respect to development, and of course will grow and enhance and be enhanced by the growth management process. In social services, it's no secret that the state and federal governments, of course, are reviewing and changing the methodology with respect to social service provisions within the country, and we have to somehow respond to that, and we feel strong that the people involved in that endeavor are going to succeed. Healthcare, the health department is involved in a community health profile project that Dan mentioned, and the thing that's interesting about that particular project is they incorporate what's called benchmarks. And the benchmark concept is certainly not new, but it might be new to Missoula. And what it does is it asks a couple of questions, and it allows some follow-through. And that is, where are we? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? And then how do we make the judgment that we have, in fact, arrived? The last, of course, is open space. The city and the county, of course, have passed the open space bond issue, and everyone is pleased because of that, because it does provide for our future enjoyment of these wonderful hills and valleys that we live in. As you can see, there are lots of things going on, and we've only touched on a few, and my the whole notion of my talk was to provoke some commentary and also some discussion, and I'm going to be open for that as well as Dan now. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to be here.
We have a few moments for questions, and I have this Mr. Microphone. Is there anyone who would like to ask either of our presenters a question? You don't need a microphone. Are there any questions?
I always figured when I made a presentation, if nobody asked a question, I had failed miserably. And I think you both have done a fine job. I have a question about social service concerns. What kind of planning is going on the city and the county level to address the impending federal cuts that will impact local nonprofits who are really providing the safety net for those in need?
Who are you addressing this to, Deb? Anyone?
Either of you.
Dan, you want to try your one? I'm happy to. Social service, of course, is a large issue. It's a monumental issue, and it seems to get larger rather than smaller as time goes by. Some of the efforts that have been made include, of course, the Blue Ribbon Commission, which was sponsored last year and involves new approaches basically by the three funding providers in Missoula, the City of Missoula, the County of Missoula, and United Way. And one of those efforts has to do with how we manage the approach to providing funding to the community-based organizations who are many of the providers within this community. And the idea is to, during this budget constraint process, to find ways to reduce the overall administrative costs involved in administering those particular funds, and also finding a streamlined way of dealing with those services in a unified way between the three agencies. You've noticed some controversy in the newspaper over time about some of the agencies that all three of us provide funds to, and we're hoping to reduce the amount of that controversy and focus all of the energy that we have really on delivering the service and providing for that need. So that's at least one part. I'm sure Dan might have some additional comments.
Well, let me just say a couple of things. First of all, Michael refers to the, is this mic? It's not on. Okay. Michael referred to the Blue Ribbon Commission. You'll remember this is our second Blue Ribbon Commission. The first one took place several years ago, and one of the results of it was to sort of get the city out of the social service business. That has begun to change now, and in particular as the city moves toward entitlement status for community development block grants, the city is inevitably drawn back more into this arena. One of the reasons I'm so pleased about merging the two planning offices is that we're merging our two grants offices as well, and we're going to be able to work a lot more effectively together in this arena. But the other thing I want to say is that there is no way that we can replace the sort of welfare state approach of the federal government with a welfare state approach at the local level. If we're going to address human needs, we have to recognize the limitations on government's ability to do that. And we have to pay as much attention to building the community support system, especially to strengthening families in our community, recognizing that it's there above all that we have to address these issues. We've got to stop dealing with issues after they've become problems. We've got to start dealing as a society in a way that prevents them from becoming problems in the first place. I think Missoula is especially well positioned to begin taking that approach.
Good afternoon. I'm Mary Canty and I work with Missoula Community Access Television. When you're talking about how the community is developing and what kind of merging of space can we do to provide services to community members, I'm interested in the information age and the electronic landscape that's developing. One of my primary concerns is the disparity of information services that community members now face, whether they own a computer, whether they don't, whether they have internet access, whether they don't, and what we can do about that. The library and MCAT have expressed an interest in working together along those lines. We've tried to include the city and the county in those discussions. But I want to broaden our landscape a little bit today and include that as a service that we need to look at in the future. So I'd like to hear your ideas about how that might be developing. And my second part of my question is, when do you think we could look forward to the county participating in MCAT's activities, not just as a television access center, but possibly more along with the library again as an information access center? Thank you.
Again, a cooperative venture between the city and county comes to play here, and we need to talk about that a bit. The city and the county, of course, have for some time operated some common facilities, from a telephone switch to some discussion and cooperation with respect to our computer system, our network. And that continues to grow as that industry grows. And a next effort, which we are now receiving proposals on, is a geographic information system format that we are cooperating again with the city on. And of course, that is a new technology, high technology that costs an enormous amount, not only investment of the study of it, but the application of those processes. And so what we've had to do, looking at the overall budgetary process, is prioritize what we can do now and what we want to do in the future. And on the county's part, what we've done to deal with that particular problem is we've instituted just recently, within the last couple of months, a new management team. And one of the purposes of the management team is to talk about those issues that are going to face us not only today, but within the next 5 years, say, on an annual basis, to make sure that we can establish priorities in a fair way and make sure that the money that we spend is prioritized and is spent in an appropriate way for the community. So I can't give you a better answer than that, except that yes, we are in the high-tech age. Yes, we are heading in that direction. Yes, we know we need to be there. And yes, someday we will get there. The question is, right now, we simply don't know exactly when, and we can't pick that for you.
We have time for one more question.
My name is Chester Morris. I'm with American Express Financial Advisors. However, before I worked there, I worked for 8 years with adolescents in psychiatric health care. And I agree with you there, Tim, is that we need to be proactive. My question, my concern is regarding youth violence and the influx of gangs, which comes with the growth of population. What current program is in effect now in order to market the community, to become involved in doing things differently so that we don't have the similar problem that occurs in other cities throughout our country? I'm aware of the articles in the Missoulian. I'm aware of what the police force has been doing. I'm curious about what's being done in order to combine the government with the private sector in order to accomplish the goal of keeping a very high quality of life here in our community for us as adults and for our children as well.
Well, I'm glad that you've raised that. I was actually tempted to make most of the State of Missoula address focus on that issue because I think it is such a crucial issue to the community. I am convinced, as I alluded to, that the only way that we can stay ahead of this issue is by calling on the entire community and all of its major institutions to work together as cooperatively and as intelligently as we know how. I congratulate the Missoulian for raising awareness on this issue by running what I thought was an excellent series of articles. That's one institution that has begun to do its part. Obviously, that needs to continue. The Missoulian and all the rest of the media need to be available to the community as a resource, a medium through which we think this issue through. We have seen in the case of the North Side, a neighborhood coming together and making up its mind that it is going to deal with this issue in its own terms and by getting parents involved with teenagers. And we as a community need to back that neighborhood in its efforts and invite other neighborhoods to become part of a similar effort. I, for one, believe that this issue gives us the opportunity to do something we have never done very well, and that is to ask our young people to bring their intelligence and their goodwill to bear in helping us to figure out the answers to this problem. They know a lot more than we give them credit for. And on this issue, they may well know more than we know. And there is a double edge to that approach. First of all, we'll be smarter as a community if we involve them in dealing with it. But secondly, we'll be attacking the problem itself, because part of the problem comes from the fact that young people are not given enough opportunities to engage constructively with the community. We've got to start turning that around as part of the overall answer to the problem itself. I have a lot I'd like to say about this, and over the next few months, I and many others will be discussing it at length with you. But I welcome everyone's involvement in the issue. That's what it's going to take.
I have only just a small comment on it. That's an issue that certainly government can't solve by itself. Government can do a lot of things, but government certainly can't raise children. And I think there's a major issue there. When we notice, for example, the crime that was committed on 39th Street or so a couple of weeks ago, 2 young men shot another man, and probably there's no conscience involved there. There's nothing that government can do that's ever going to instill a conscience in that person. So I think as a society, I agree with Dan that we have a serious obligation to deal with this in a preventive mode, and that is loving our children and working very hard at preventing these kinds of things from happening to begin with. Because government certainly isn't going to answer that question. What government's good at is building jails, and that's not an appropriate response.
Thank you, Commissioner Kennedy, Mayor Canvas, for coming to the 11th Annual State of Missoula program. In 1997, we're going to be, the Chamber will be sponsoring its biennial legislative banquet in Helena. We'll probably push back this program next year, so if you mark your calendars for February 11th, 18th, or 25th in 1997, we look forward to having Mayor Kempis and, based on the rotation, Commissioner Bernhardt. On behalf of President Don Sokolowski, the Board of Directors, and the rest of the membership of the Chamber, thank you for coming.